Morning television is supposed to be light, bubbly, and safe. Laughter over coffee, easy questions, and celebrity charm. But when Emma Watson sat down on the This Morning sofa across from Allison Hammond and Dermot O'Leary, the atmosphere began to crack. What started as polite small talk unraveled into one of the most intellectually charged and deeply uncomfortable interviews the show had ever aired. Allison tried to keep her trademark warmth. Dermot attempted to navigate the dense conversation, but Emma's unyielding academic seriousness pushed the studio into chaos. By the time it ended, Allison had lost her patience. Emma had walked out, and This Morning had gone down in TV history. The familiar theme music faded out as the cameras swept across the This Morning set. Sunlight poured through the glass panels of the studio, bouncing off cheerful flowers arranged neatly on the coffee table. Allison Hammond's booming laugh kicked things off. "Good morning, everyone. Today we have a very special guest, acclaimed actress, UN Women Goodwill Ambassador, and fierce advocate for sustainable consumption, Emma Watson." The studio audience erupted in polite applause. Emma entered gracefully, hair pulled back neatly. She walked with a deliberate, focused energy, her smile earnest and measured. Allison leaned in for a hug, and Emma accepted it politely, though her posture remained reserved. The moment was subtle, but the air in the studio shifted slightly. "Welcome to This Morning, Emma," Dermot O'Leary said warmly, motioning toward the sofa. "Thank you," Emma replied with careful clarity. "It's always interesting to engage on platforms like this." Allison laughed, brushing off the formality. "We're so thrilled to have you. Now, you've been busy, new projects, appearances, but mostly a huge focus on climate justice and global education. Tell us what's going on." Emma's expression tightened into one of deep concentration. "What's going on is urgency, Dermot. We're facing simultaneous systemic collapses, ecological, political, and social. My focus is on using my voice to elevate the conversation beyond celebrity gossip and into actionable policy critique. That's what matters." Her words landed with a precise, almost lecture-like tone. Dermot nodded, attempting to meet her gravitas. "And your upcoming nonfiction project, can you share more with our viewers?" "Of course," Emma said, leaning back slightly. "It's about systemic truth, about giving space for voice from the global south to articulate their lived experience with climate colonialism, without being edited into palatable sound bites. It's about acknowledging the intersectional complexity of the crisis, something I know quite a bit about." A faint, nervous chuckle escaped the audience, half impressed, half uncertain. Allison picked up on the tension, but pushed forward with her trademark cheer. "That's wonderful. But of course, people are also curious. You've been acting less, focusing more on research. How do you find balance? Do you ever just switch off and watch a box set?" Emma's lips curved, but the smile didn't quite soften the serious intensity in her eyes. "To seek balance is a very privileged inquiry, Allison. As activists, we understand that we don't get to switch off. The climate crisis doesn't pause for a box set, and I've made my decision about where my intellectual energy must be directed." Polite applause followed. Dermot moved to the next card, but Allison wasn't finished. "And your former co-stars, Rupert, Daniel, you've all been working on separate projects. How is that friendship navigating the different career paths?" Emma's eyes flicked to Allison, her tone sharpening with academic scrutiny. "You wouldn't ask a group of male financial CEOs how their partnerships are balancing out based on their investment strategies, Allison. We are adults. We manage our lives. It's not that complicated, nor is it relevant to the global discussion." The warmth in the studio cooled. Allison laughed nervously. Fair enough, but people adore the three of you together, and they wonder how you juggle your high-profile background with your current serious focus, especially with the pressure of public opinion." Emma's voice grew firmer. "I don't juggle, Allison. I prioritize. My previous work is not the point here. The focus should be on the structural reforms required to prevent further destabilization." A murmur rippled through the audience. Dermot jumped in quickly. "Let's pivot to the industry talk, Emma. There have been reports, fair or not, about you stepping away from major studio roles. Some suggest you found the Hollywood system too shallow or commercial. What's your response?" Emma gave a short, almost disappointed sigh. When a man prioritizes intellectual integrity over commercial gain, he's hailed as a visionary. When a woman does, she's labeled as difficult or pretentious. I don't chase notoriety, Dermot. I pursue meaningful engagement. A smattering of applause. Allison raised her brows, forcing another smile. Strong answer. And of course, people can't forget your early comments on the capitalist model of the fashion industry. You've called fast fashion ecologically colonial in the past. Do you still feel the same way? Emma crossed her legs, her posture shifting into something determined. Tradition doesn't equal sustainability. Centuries of extractive industry don't erase the harm done to the global South. I don't romanticize economic models that wound the planet. The audience grew quiet. Allison exhaled slowly, her cheerful facade flickering. Dermot adjusted his tie, trying to keep things steady. Well, he said smoothly, that's certainly something for people to think about. But everyone in the studio knew it. The tension had only just begun. The control room buzzed as producers exchanged nervous glances. They could already sense this was no ordinary interview. Dermot cleared his throat, determined to pull the segment back to lighter waters. Let's dig into your creative side, Emma, he said smoothly, shuffling his cards. Viewers are fascinated by the visual storytelling in your documentaries. Do you see yourself moving more toward pure academic work, or will you continue to use the accessible media format? Emma gave him a measured, almost clinical smile. I don't box myself into arbitrary categories, Dermot. I communicate the urgency of the data. Whether that intimidates the commercial media landscape or not is their problem. The words were coded in precise language, but delivered with an intellectual condescension that hung in the air. Allison clapped her hands once, too brightly. Well, that's very empowering, but of course, with communication comes a responsibility to be accessible. Some critics have said your work is, well, let's say, heavily focused on academic jargon and can feel elitist. Do you feel that's fair? Emma tilted her head, her eyes narrowing just slightly. When men use complex terminologies to discuss climate economics, they're called Nobel laureates. When women demand precision in language, we're accused of intellectual narcissism. Perhaps the problem isn't my vocabulary, Allison, but society's endemic reluctance to engage with complexity. The studio audience, usually filled with laughter and applause, sat uncomfortably quiet. Allison forced another chuckle, her hands clasped tightly together. I'm only asking what people wonder, Emma, and speaking of accessible issues, she paused, her tone softening. How is your dog? People love seeing your updates on him here in the UK. People miss that light side of you. Emma's expression hardened into one of slight offense. My dog is not a means for public consumption, Allison. He is not a distraction Britain gets to miss like a lost puppy video. He is a sentient being, my companion, and frankly, he's thriving without constant, shallow intrusion. The sharpness in her voice startled even Dermot, who quickly leaned forward. Of course. And your focus on university lecturing, our viewers often ask how that balances with your visibility. Do you fear your celebrity status overshadows the academic merit of your work? For the first time, Emma's serious demeanor faltered into open irritation. My credentials are not for public consumption. The world doesn't get to demand a progress report on my expertise as though I'm a reality show contestant. Allison nodded, but her eyes flickered with growing unease. Of course, we respect that. Still, people at home watching often relate to seeing public figures balance the everyday with the cerebral. It inspires them to read more. Emma let out a cold, controlled laugh. Then perhaps people at home should focus on decolonizing their syllabi instead of obsessing over my reading list. The audience gasped softly. The temperature on set dropped a degree. Allison's usually unstoppable warmth faltered, and for the first time her famous laugh didn't come. She sat straight, her lips pursed, eyes narrowing. Dermot raised his hand slightly, trying to cool the air. Let's talk industry again, shall we? Those reports. It's been said, purely reports, mind you, that you demanded total creative control and veto power over your recent project's marketing. Some suggest it was about control. Others say it was about the purity of the message. Can you clarify? Emma leaned back, crossing her arms. Clarify? I don't explain myself to clickbait narratives. The academic institutions know my commitment. If the press is shocked that a woman dares to demand intellectual fidelity, that's their scandal, not mine. Allison's jaw tightened. But Emma, isn't it fair to say those demands are what keeps your name in the headlines? People see you lecturing the industry, yet still commanding global attention. Doesn't that contradict your desire to move the conversation away from the cult of celebrity? Emma's tone dripped with intellectual disdain. Visibility doesn't mean complicity, Allison. I didn't abandon my platform. I repurposed it to speak about the climate. If people can't understand the difference between being a spokesperson and a commodity, that's hardly my fault. A tense silence followed. Dermot shifted uncomfortably, clearly sensing Allison's patience was wearing thin. She tried again, softer this time. But Emma, surely you can see why the public might be confused. You've spoken often about wanting to minimize the impact of fame, yet you remain very much in the spotlight. Emma gave her a pointed stare. Minimizing impact doesn't mean disappearing. It means setting boundaries. If the public struggles with that, perhaps it's because they're too used to women being shallow and commercially compliant. The audience murmured again, half in approval, half in disapproval. Allison's laugh finally returned, but it was brittle, strained. You've always had strong words for the commodification of culture, Emma. When you look back now, do you regret being part of a mega franchise that is now the definition of commercial IP? Emma's voice grew colder. Regret? Never. That franchise was a stepping stone. It was a vehicle for access. I spoke the truth about the exploitative nature of Hollywood. I'll never apologize for that. The studio seemed to freeze. Allison's eyes widened just slightly. Then she recovered with her usual warmth, but it was clear the mask was cracking. Well, that's certainly one way to put it, Dermot hurried to interject. What Emma means is, but Emma cut across him sharply. What I mean is exactly what I said, Dermot. I don't require an interpreter to simplify my theoretical framework. The studio audience gasped again. Allison sat back, inhaling slowly, her hands gripping the edge of the sofa. For the first time in her long career, her signature patience was visibly thinning. Dermot glanced nervously at her, then at the cameras. Right. Well, we'll take a short break in just a moment. But first, Emma, what do you hope people take away from your projects moving forward? Emma's reply was instant, focused, cutting. That critical engagement has no expiration date, no matter how much institutions or morning shows try to bury it beneath trivia. The words landed like a hammer. Allison's smile vanished. The warmth in her eyes was gone, her lips pressed into a thin line, and the spark that made her beloved by millions flickered into something sharper, colder. Dermot caught the look on her face and knew the storm was coming. When the show returned from the brief commercial break, the tension was still thick in the studio air. Dermot plastered on his best professional smile, but Allison's energy had shifted. The usual sparkle in her eyes was muted, replaced with something closer to calculation and frustration. Emma, on the other hand, looked entirely unfazed, perched seriously on the sofa as though she were waiting for a graduate seminar to begin. Dermot leaned forward first, determined to steer things back on track. Now, Emma, before the break, you spoke about critical engagement, and your projects have always generated strong reactions, both positive and critical. How do you handle that kind of constant scrutiny? Emma gave a slow, deliberate look of perspective. Scrutiny is often intellectual laziness in disguise, Dermot. People prefer to debate the messenger rather than the complex structural message. I've stopped caring about winning over the masses. If they can't rise to the required level of intellectual rigor, that's their burden. The audience shifted uncomfortably. Allison gave a short, awkward laugh. Well, Emma, not everyone at home sees it that way. Some just feel confused by the contradictions. For example, you speak against commercialism, but people also point out you've benefited enormously from your early fame, your visibility, and your personal brand. Emma's head snapped toward Allison. Her serious expression hardened, her tone sharp. Benefited? You mean survived and repurposed? Do you have any idea what it's like to be chewed up by a commercial machine and spit out as a caricature of your intellectual self. The franchise didn't hand me anything. I built my knowledge base. My platform is dedicated to activism, not theirs. Allison's face tightened. But Emma, with respect, your global recognition came because you were the face of a billion-dollar commercial fantasy. That's what gave you the stage you're standing on today. A few gasps escaped the audience. Dermot quickly interjected, his voice soothing. What Allison means is... But Emma cut him off. No, I heard exactly what she meant. And it's facile. My worth isn't defined by a merchandising contract. I'm not some celebrity clinging to borrowed intellectual legitimacy. Allison's hands gripped her cards a little too firmly now. Yet, Emma, you continue to speak about the entertainment industry and your past roles at every opportunity. Isn't that still clinging? If you truly wanted to move on to pure academia, why keep bringing them up? Emma leaned back, her posture dripping with intellectual superiority. Silence protects the status quo, Allison. And if that makes people uncomfortable, then maybe they should examine their own complicity in maintaining the commercialized narrative instead of questioning my didactic approach. The air snapped tight. Even Dermot's practiced calm faltered. He shifted uneasily in his seat, trying to lighten things. Let's not forget Emma's projects also focus on charity, on sustainable living, on giving back. But Allison wasn't smiling anymore. Her voice was sharper, her warmth gone. I don't question giving back, Emma. I question the way you present yourself as a detached intellectual while living in the undeniable luxury that the commercial world afforded you. People at home watching this are struggling with bills, with basic survival, with reality. Do you understand how your words sound to them? Constantly lecturing from a place of immense privilege. Emma blinked almost in disbelief. Luxury? Are we seriously going to reduce my intellectual journey to the square footage of my home? That's beneath the required level of discourse, Allison. Allison's voice rose. The famous Hammond laugh nowhere in sight. What's beneath me, Emma, is the intellectual arrogance you have displayed since you sat down. Every question is met with a lecture. Every criticism is labeled as shallowness. Maybe, just maybe, people are tired of being lectured by someone who constantly scolds the commercial world, but gladly took its millions when it suited her. The studio audience erupted in shocked murmurs. Dermot immediately raised his hands, his voice urgent. All right, let's all just... But Allison wasn't done. Her eyes flashed, her tone fierce. You talk about dismantling systems, Emma, but the truth is you benefited from them. You used the platform, the spotlight, the global attention, and when it stopped serving your intellectual narrative, you turned around and branded the entire industry shallow. You can't have it both ways. Emma's lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she looked genuinely rattled. She straightened her tailored blazer, eyes narrowing at Allison. I don't need to justify my intellectual choices to morning show hosts. I've lived a truth bigger than this studio will ever understand. The words dripped with lofty disdain. Allison leaned forward now, abandoning all pretense of bubbly professionalism. Truth or elitism? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've milked every ounce of fame that the commercial machine gave you. And when people push back with common sense questions, you painted yourself as an intellectual martyr. That's not truth, Emma. That's performance of superiority. The audience gasped audibly this time, some clapping, others stunned into silence. Dermot stood halfway from his chair, his palms out. Let's calm down, please. We're live and this isn't... Allison snapped back, not at Dermot, but at Emma. Do you have any idea how dismissive it is to sit here morning after morning talking to people who work hard for everything they have while you sit there and sneer about their lack of intellectual rigor, all while cashing in on the very celebrity system you despise? Enough is enough. The silence that followed was thunderous. Emma crossed her arms tightly, her chin lifted high. Her voice, when it came, was cold steel. If the British public expected me to simplify my discourse forever in gratitude for their box office receipts, they chose the wrong woman. I will never apologize for refusing to lower the intellectual bar. Not for you, Not for anyone. Allison exhaled slowly, her voice trembling but firm. Then maybe this interview should end right here, because I won't sit here and watch you dismiss every question as beneath you, Emma. This is This Morning, not your personal lecture hall. Dermot moved quickly, trying to salvage the wreck. Let's take another quick break, but the damage was already done. The audience knew it, the producers knew it, and Emma knew it. The showdown was no longer simmering, it had boiled over, and the next part would decide who walked out of that studio intact and who didn't. The break was short, but it didn't cool the heat simmering on set. When the cameras came back live, Dermot O'Leary wore a strange smile, clearly trying to maintain control of a segment that had veered dangerously off script. Beside him, Allison Hammond sat upright, her shoulders squared, her eyes blazing with a mix of anger and resolve. Emma Watson, poised as ever, leaned back in her seat with her arms crossed and her chin tilted defensively, as though daring anyone to challenge her intellectual authority further. Dermot cleared his throat. Welcome back to This Morning. We've been having a very candid conversation with Emma Watson about her projects and her intellectual pursuits. Emma, let's try to steer this towards something positive. You've spoken often about education. What message would you like to leave with our viewers today? Emma's lips curled into a thin, sad smile, but her voice carried a sharp edge of disappointment. The message is simple, Dermot. Stop expecting women like me to constantly simplify ourselves. Stop demanding gratitude for circumstances that came with as much commercial success as intellectual compromise. I don't owe anyone my intellectual silence, least of all a television audience dedicated to distraction. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some clapped politely, others whispered. Allison exhaled, shaking her head slowly. Her patience had been stretched to its breaking point. Emma, she began, her voice still calm but noticeably strained. No one here is demanding your silence, but the way you've handled yourself today, dismissing every human question, belittling every common sense challenge, it's not intellectual strength, it's elitism. Emma's eyebrows shot up. Elitism? Allison, perhaps you should consider that my refusal to bow down to petty trivia is intellectual integrity, not elitism. Maybe that's something you're not used to seeing in women who demand depth. Gasps rippled through the audience. Allison froze for a moment, then leaned forward, her voice dropping to a lower, more dangerous register. Don't you dare, Emma. Don't you twist this into some narrative about people being threatened by your intelligence. I've championed learning my entire career. What I won't champion is academic snobbery, pretension, and a complete lack of accessibility. Dermot tried to interject, raising his hands. Right, all right, let's... But Allison's words thundered over him now, unstoppable. You say you hate the commercial media, Emma. You say it makes you shallow, that it destroyed your serious image. But let's be real. You wouldn't be sitting on this sofa today if you hadn't been the face of that commercial fantasy. You wouldn't have your UN ambassador role, your speaking fees, or the headlines that give weight to your academic work. You used the machine when it suited your financial needs, then spat it out when it didn't serve your intellectual image. And now you sit here sneering at every question as though the world owes you a platform for preaching. The studio erupted in shocked gasps and murmurs. Emma's face flushed crimson, her jaw tightening. How dare you suggest I used anyone? My work is about truth, Allison. My life is my own. And if I've chosen to share parts of my theoretical framework with the world, that's my right. Allison leaned in, her voice fierce and unrelenting. Truth? Then why does it always look like you're capitalizing on your Harry Potter fame? The man who actually made the creative work, the writers, the crew, they've been reduced to a footnote in your intellectual brand. You talk about integrity, yet every door you've walked through was opened by that commercial success. Admit it. You've leaned on that fame, and you've milked it dry. The words hit like a hammer. The audience gasped louder than ever, some even applauding the bluntness. Dermot, visibly panicked, tried to intervene. Okay, let's keep this professional. But Emma snapped, her voice sharp as glass. I will not sit here and be accused of exploiting my own career on national television. This is a disgraceful ambush, and frankly, Allison, It says more about your fear of intellectual challenge than it does about me. Allison didn't flinch. Her voice rose above Emma's fury, clear and resolute. No, Emma. It says everything about you. The truth is you've strutted onto this set with nothing but intellectual condescension, mocking every question, acting like you're too important to be challenged by common people. Well, let me tell you something. This is This Morning, not your personal intellectual summit, and I won't sit here and let you talk down to us or our audience for one more second. The audience burst into applause, some even standing. Emma's mouth opened as though to deliver a final crushing academic retort, but Allison cut her off with a hand raised. Enough. This interview is over. You've shown exactly who you are, and this program will not continue to give you a platform for this elitism. Emma stood abruptly, pulling off her microphone. The wire snagged for a moment before she tore it free, her movement sharp and furious. She looked down at Allison, her voice trembling with rage. You'll regret this. The world will see how you silenced a crucial voice today. Allison's reply was firm and final. The world just saw exactly how you treated your audience, Emma. Don't blame me for that. With that, Emma spun on her heel and stormed off the set, her heels clacking against the floor. The studio doors swung shut behind her, leaving a stunned silence in her wake. Dermot sat frozen, glancing between Allison and the cameras. Allison took a deep breath, then faced the audience, her expression softening with genuine regret. To everyone watching at home, I want to apologize for what just happened. That wasn't the interview we planned, and it certainly wasn't the tone we wanted. But sometimes live television shows people as they truly are, and today we all saw it. The audience erupted into applause, this time for Allison. Dermot nodded solemnly. We'll be back after the break. The cameras faded to black, but the clip would not. By the afternoon, social media would be ablaze with hashtags, headlines, and debates, and Emma Watson's disastrous appearance on This Morning would go down as one of the most shocking live television moments in British history. If you enjoyed this unbelievable story, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more dramatic showdowns and shocking live TV moments. Drop a comment below. Do you think Allison was right to call Emma out, or did things go too